Today's book is Hard to Be a God by Boris and Arkady Strugatsky. This is a novel that was published in 1964 under the USSR regime, and it's one of the more famous novels by these two brothers. The back cover says, it tells the story of Don Rumata, who is sent from Earth to the medieval kingdom of Arkanar with instructions to observe and to influence, but never to directly interfere. Masquerading as an arrogant nobleman, a dueler, and a brawler, Don Rumata is never defeated but can never kill. With his doubt and compassion and his deep love for a local girl named Kira, Rumata wants to save the kingdom from the machinations of Don Reba, the first minister to be king. But given his orders, what role can he play? So that's kind of the synopsis of what the story is about. It tells the story of this man who is on a parallel planet that seems to correlate with what Earth was like during the medieval times. And his mission is to observe what's going on with these people. He finds himself in some interesting situations. Overall, I think that the story was a bit confusing to read. From the very beginning, it starts with a prologue of some people in the forest, and then it seems to have those characters tell the story of Don Ramada. However, the shift between the two narratives is kind of polarizing, and it's kind of unclear that this is what's happening. And then the story itself is kind of a critique of communism during this time. And so it's a little bit challenging to understand all of the nuances, as I'm not that familiar with this period of time in history. But overall, it's an interesting science fiction story. It's one that I think with more historical background would definitely make more sense. In the afterwards, Boris Strugatsky gave some information about what it was like to write the novel. They were faced with a lot of criticism. I believe this was during the time when Gorbachev saw a exhibit on abstract art and his very negative criticism of what he thought about that. And during that tumultuous time, a number of artists were trying to identify how to continue creating their art form in a way that would be pleasing to the government. And so in the face of that, this story tells this tale that originally wanted to be like a Three Musketeers tale, full of humor and joy, and yet it evolved into something that tells a much more cynical kind of story. Overall, I thought that this story, while interesting, would definitely have benefited from more knowledge about the time period during which it was written. Because of that, I'm going to have to give this story 1.5 stars. I wasn't really engaged with the story itself. I thought it was a little bit difficult to follow, and the references or critiques of the government were kind of over my head, so it was a little challenging to understand the premise of what was going on in the story. The story itself had a fairly lackluster plot. Not very much happened, and it was kind of challenging to keep engaged throughout the story. So overall, it's an interesting example of writing a story under a very conservative regime, but the story was not necessarily my cup of tea.